Let's take a few ways that we can interact with Azure Storage Blobs. So one of the first things we need to understand is how do we move data around in storage blobs? And thankfully Microsoft has given us a few tools to be able to do this. One of the first ones is Storage Explorer. And that's a GUI tool that allows you to browse and download and as well as upload objects to storage accounts. Since we're focusing mostly on Blob, that's what we're going to work with. However, Storage Explorer will work with almost all the services within Azure storage accounts. Another tool that we'll take a look at is AZ Copy. And this is a command line tool that lets you download objects from the storage account or upload. So it's basically just a command line version of Storage Explorer. And you can also leverage Azure PowerShell and Azure CLI to interact with blobs in a similar way that you can do with AZ Copy. When a decision has been made to prevent your data from being modified, the idea of worm comes into play, which is write once and read many. There's a few ways that we can configure this. And essentially what we're doing is we're making sure we're defining our storage so that it cannot be modified. There might be a couple reasons for doing this, but there's also a few different ways we can configure this. And one is a time-based retention policy. We can specify a certain interval, and when that policy is set, the blobs can be read and created, but they can't be modified after they've been created or deleted. After that retention period has expired, the blobs can then be deleted, but they cannot be overwritten or modified essentially. Another one is legal hold. And the retention period here is often known because who knows how long a legal case can take. When legal hold is set, blobs can be again created or read, but they can not be modified or deleted. Each legal hold is associated with a user-defined alphanumeric tag, such as case ID, event name, etc., and this is used as an identifying string. With that said, I think we need to talk about metadata. The definition of metadata is a set of data that describes and gives information about other data. When speaking about blobs, there are a number of properties that can be defined. By default, there are system properties. And some examples of this would be content type, created on, last modified, and so on. There are also user-defined metadata. And these are custom key value pairs that you can create and add to the blob. There are a number of ways that we can view and add metadata to the blob. We can do this using .NET, Azure CLI, or within the portal. We've talked about a couple different ways that we can work with a storage blob. Let's go see them in action. So what we're going to do in this demonstration is we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can act with Azure storage accounts. We're going to use the Azure Storage Explorer to upload a file. We're then going to use the AZ Copy tool to download that sample file. And then we're going to use the Azure CLI tool to upload that file to a second storage account. It's worth noting that any of these tasks that we're doing can be completed in any one of these tools. We're just using 3 different tools to give you an example as far as how each one works. We're going to go ahead and open up Azure Storage Explorer, and you can see here we've got ability to interact with storage accounts, Cosmos DB, as well as Data Lake. Today we're just going to focus on storage accounts. So in order to get started, we need to add a storage account. Let's right-click on Storage Accounts and then Connect to Storage Account. We're going to use the storage account name and key to connect, but you can see there's a variety of options. So we'll go ahead and select that and then click on Next. It's going to ask us for some basic information. Let's go to the portal and you can see we already have the Skyline storage account opened up. And if we go down to Access Keys on the left, you can see we've got the information here we need to get connected. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and copy the storage account name. We'll go back to Storage Explorer and I'm going to paste that in there for the display name as well as the account name. And now it's asking us for the account key. And if we go down here, we can select this and we'll hit copy. And the account key is basically another way to authenticate to the storage account. It's similar in concept to the shared access signature we created earlier or discussed earlier. Except this is full access to the storage account. It's not going to give you the ability to granularly control permissions. So with that said, let's go ahead and paste that account key in there. We'll hit Next, and then it's going to validate. And you can see here we are connected. And if we go ahead and open up Blob Storage and then Container1, we can see the city.json and city2.json file that we were working with earlier. So our goal this time is we're going to upload a file. So we're going to go ahead and select Upload, Files, and then we're just going to grab a file from our desktop. So let's go ahead and hit the ellipses, select the sample file, hit Open, and Upload. And you can see it's starting the transfer of that file up to the storage account and it's completed. Now we can see that sample file, that text is there. So what we want to do now is we're going to download that file using the AZ Copy tool. Let's Let's go back to the portal and click on Storage Explorer. And this is very similar to what we just used with the desktop application. However, it is specific to the storage account. But we're going to go to Blob Containers, expand Container 1, and then we're going to select our sample file.txt. What we're going to do up here is we're going to copy that URL. And now if we go over here and if we tried to open that, it's going to fail because, again, we don't have any sort of authentication here or any shared access signature. We'll go ahead and close this though for the time being. We'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and you can see I've got some basic information already populated here. So for the first example, we're using the AZ copy tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in the source, which is that file we listed. However, it's worth noting though that this is going to fail because AZ copy doesn't have any authentication information. So to make this work, we also need to go in and create a shared access signature. So let's do that real quick. If we go back to the portal, let's go down to shared access signature. And again, we're only going to be using for blob. We're going to want to give it full permissions here, and we'll leave the default start stop times. We're going to require HTTPS, and let's go ahead and generate a string here. So we're going to go ahead and copy our SAS token. And if we go back to Visual Studio Code, we'll paste that on the end here. We're going to go ahead and copy this to define our variables. And if we go back over to Windows Terminal, let's go ahead and paste these in. So now we've got our variables defined. So now we're going to run the command azcopy, which we have downloaded and installed. We're going to do copy source to destination and hit enter. Now it's going to go ahead and run. It's going to see that it is looking for that file, and now it's going to go ahead and download that locally to that destination, which we defined in examples blob storage. So now let's go over to our window here. Let's go open up examples, blob storage, and now we can see that sample file is there. So let's go ahead and take a look at that file. Hi, Bob. My kids are a big fan of Hotel Transylvania 3, so we hear that all the time around our house. Anyhow, so now that we have that file there, what we're going to do is we're going to then now take that file and use AZCLI to copy that up to a second storage account. So let's go ahead and minimize this. We're going to close this and minimize this. Let's go take a look at that second storage account. And if you remember right earlier, this is the one that we created using Azure CLI. If we open up this file here, we can go through and go to Storage Explorer, go to our blob accounts. You can see we've got a test blob created, or excuse me, a test containers created, and we can see we don't have any information here. So what we need to do now is we need to get the URL for that container. So if we scroll down here to containers, we can select our test one, and if we click container properties, we can see we've got our URL there. So let's go ahead and copy that. We're going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and now we're going to paste in that destination. So you can see we've got our destination there. We also have the source defined as that sample file in the blob storage folder. And if we look with this one, we can see the parameters are slightly different. We've got AZ storage copy because it is within the Azure CLI underneath the storage properties, and we define our source and destination this way. Additionally, you might notice that there's no shared access signature or any sort of authentication that needs to be provided. And that's because in order to use the AZ storage command, you have to already be logged into Azure CLI. So to do this, I'm going to go down here. We'll do AZ login. It's going to prompt us to sign in. We're going to go ahead and pick the account we want to log into. So we select that. We can see login is successful. And if we minimize this, you can see we are now logged in. So let's go ahead and validate this works. So we're going to go ahead and copy this again. And again, we're defining our source and destination variables. And then we're going to use those in that command, the AZ storage copy command. So let's go down here. We'll right click paste. It's going to give us the warning that we're going to paste lines. That's okay. We'll go ahead and paste anyway. And now let's go ahead and run enter. And it's seeing that it went ahead and copied that file. It's giving us some warning information about RBAC roles. That's fine. Let's validate it worked. Let's go back up to the second storage account. Let's go back to Storage Explorer here. Look at our blob container. And now we can see our test file is there. So, or excuse me, our sample file is there. So everything worked like it should. I do recommend that you play around a little bit with Storage Explorer, with AZ Copy, as well as the Azure CLI tools. I think all three of them would be important to know for using Azure in general, and I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a question or two on the test.